Hello, I'm Karl Povey from the University of Central Lancashire, and today I'm here to talk to you about a phenomenology of Roman forts in northern Britain and how they control landscapes. Now, as many of you may know, Roman Britain is one of our better known historical approaches, as we have detailed accounts of exact days in which activities are completed, such as Vindolanda writing tablets that will illustrate days of people's birthdays, amount of pay that soldiers received, and then we also get details like the exact day in which Roman Britain was invaded by Claudius and his 50,000 Roman soldiers. And this day was the 22nd of August, 43 AD. And he invaded from southern Britain in what we believe to be Richborough, over near London, and then he slowly progressed north. However, I'll use one case study today, as in Brentakium Fort in Ribchester, which is based around 30 miles north of Manchester and about 60 miles south of Hadrian's Wall. Now, General Agricola and his son-in-law Tacitus originally entered Ribchester in 75 AD. So as you can see, it's a very hostile time in Britain at that time, as it's not fully Romanized and the defenses of like Hadrian's Wall weren't constructed until 122 AD. However, what I'm here to talk about today is a phenomenology of landscapes, or how people understand and how people perceive landscapes. More simply, phenomenology is a bracketing of natural space and pure fact. So it's an understanding of landscape, or space, and time. So as an archaeologist, we have to go through reports, build chronologies, and have an idea of exactly what's happening in landscapes. And then we can understand through the types of tasks that people completed how people would understand landscapes. So for an archaeologist, phenomenology is basically an art of seeing and understanding how the historical world was understood. And in order to illustrate this, I'll talk about the forest dwellers, or the Umanda tribe in New Guinea. Now, these people lived in a landscape that is forest. So they never really saw more than 14 feet ahead of them, or at most about 100 feet ahead of them. And they predominantly walked with their eyes down because they're tracking, they're moving through forest, and there's not that many paths. So they don't want to trip and fall. However, one day, one of the Umanda tribesmen was sent to prison. And it was very interesting because this prison was set in a significantly different landscape than a forest. It was set at the seaside. And when this man entered this landscape, he was absolutely terrified because he thought that the sky was coming to devour him. And this shows that from when he was once in a landscape that was forested and enclosed, and he never visually saw far ahead, when his landscape changed, as we can find archaeologically, we can see that he suddenly he feels emotions, such as fear. Therefore, we can put emotion into the past. For instance, with Rome, we can say someone from Rome would have lived in a very urbanized settlement, as many of you may have been to Rome. So when you're walking the streets, you're very enclosed. And like the Umanda, you don't see very far. However, then, if you're a soldier from Rome, who doesn't see very far, when you enter a landscape such as northern Britain, you suddenly see very far. And maybe this is one of the reasons why Scotland was always considered to be a hostile landscape, even though none of our forts on Hadrian's Wall have any evidence of ever even having a stone thrown at them by a hostile barbarian. Moreover, phenomenology can also give an experience and a perception of daily life. When I was at a Fort Vindolanda here, and this picture is taken in the middle of the Vicar settlement, this house right here being home to Emperor Hadrian for several months at the very beginning of the building of Hadrian's Wall, we can see that it's a hot landscape in this case, and maybe the explanation of why we have about 6,000 Roman sandals at Vindolanda can be understood. However, when I was at Vindolanda 6 months earlier, we had a strange phenomena that archaeologists really struggle to understand, and that's the weather, as this is definitely not a place I would want to walk around in sandals in. And therefore, phenomenology can give us a better understanding of what it's like to be in the past. Now, before we can do this, we have to look at the archaeology of Ribchester. Through looking through about 270 unpublished reports, dating from about 300 years ago, where we have the finding of the Ribchester parade helmet. It's a helmet that the best cavalryman in the Roman Empire was given when he won the Hippachi Gymnasium. So we can see that it's a very cavalry-driven landscape, especially as about 1,000 of these 32,000 finds are cavalry trimmings such as leather from sandals, stirrups, and other horse-related material culture. Furthermore, the archaeological debate currently in Ribchester is slightly less sophisticated than other forts like Vindolanda, as we don't have large open settlements like I showed with Vindolanda. We just have a small-scale granary, as it's a very developed landscape. Furthermore, we don't even know where the southern wall is in Ribchester, as traditional belief was that it's on the red line, and that the Brentakium fort goes against 95% of Roman forts, as traditionally they're squared, or the technical term, playing card shaped. However, more contemporary archaeologists began to think that maybe it was, and the river simply moved, as a basic teaching of geology shows that rivers move over time. So we thought that maybe the wall is at the blue line, and it's just in the river. However, I thought that maybe the wall was in the green space, on the other side of the river, and that the river dissected the fort, allowing people direct entrance into it, as we know where the most navigatable point in the river is. And furthermore, through being in the landscape, there's better places for this fort to be, as this is in an enclosed valley that can be looked into, as we'll explore again later. So in order to try to understand this mystery, I got some LiDAR data and did some standard deviation on this information. And we found that we should be having stratigraphic lines showing where the river should have been from, and then where it moved to. However, we don't, which indicates that this river has not moved in about 50,000 years. Furthermore, we also know from reconstructions of people that Roman ships can navigate no further than the grey circle. However, what we did find is about a 600-meter long linear object with a 50-meter long end in the red. So we have boats what could possibly go through the fort, but they could go no further than the grey point. But they could go straight into this linear object, which is just conveniently large enough for a Roman ship, turn around and sail back out to sea. So I propose that this is possibly a canal. However, this is definitely space for future research, as I've not had the time in order to go and geophys and excavate the area in order to prove any of that. However, what I did do was, through my excavation reports, build a chronology of Ribchester to understand the time that I was talking about. And to make this slightly easier, I made images. So we know in 75 AD, when Agricola and Tacitus entered this landscape, and we have a large timber fort with around 60 meters of ditching. And then there was a brief abandonment where we know soldiers did live in the fort, but the timber structure was completely rotting, it would have smelled, it would not have been a nice place to live. So when more soldiers returned in about 81 AD, they remodeled the fort. They redid the turf ramparts, built new walls, and excavated new ditches. However, what's an interesting fact is that in 117 AD, they completely demolished the timber fort, probably because it began to rot again, and made the stone fort. And this is what most people have been looking at when they come to Ribchester, especially the Phase 4 stone fort, as this is when the Sarmatians from southern Russia, elite cavalrymen, and the owner of the Ribchester helmet I was showing you earlier, came to the fort. And this is when the fort completely enhanced and grew. Now, the landscape of Ribchester is that it's set in the Ribble Valley. So to the north and south, it has a view of about half a mile. However, when you're at the north, you can see directly over 20-foot high walls. So it's not a tactical or a strategic place to be, which I think gives better credence to showing that the River Ribble was more important to this space than previous archaeologists like to say. But then viewing from the south, you're slightly closer to the fort. And if we have large groups of 6 to 12 cavalrymen wearing bright gold armor, as the archaeological evidence shows, because a lot of the military armor that we have has been overly polished and damaged, you'd be able to see these people, especially on sunny days. So we can say that when you're in this landscape, you can see directly into the fort, which you shouldn't be able to do, but you can also see people moving throughout the landscape. Then in the east and west, what was once in the Phase 1 in the beginning, so around 75 AD, we know this was a wooded landscape with an early Iron Age hill fort. So it would have been occupied by around 50 people, if not less. However, we very quickly get a Roman bathhouse built that's occupying the landscape for about 500 years. So it's there for the early Romans, and it continues in occupation well afterwards. But then in the west, we have the evidence of the Vicus settlement. So we know where all the veteran soldiers, when they finished their time in the fort, have moved to. So these are spaces that have become large, open, and very valuable areas as a prime agricultural land, as this is why the early Iron Age fort was there. Therefore, Ribchester is a space that you can look into, you can see people moving, you can see that there's going to be farming communities appearing, and we can know that there's an importance of the River Ribble. One critique of my work is that, as you can see, Ribchester is very developed, and I couldn't get better knowledge of the interior of the fort, but this is something that we can enhance on through future excavations. Therefore, what I'm going to say is that perceptions of space are that while timber forts do militarize landscapes by building large, imposing timber walls, then it's a very classical view. The importance as well can be seen in stone forts, as the stone forts are built around the time when people are accepting to be Roman. People are born into Roman families. The term native is no longer acceptable. So stone forts secure landscapes. However, what I think forts are doing in landscapes is they're not just going into spaces and killing people, as I was saying at Hadrian's Wall. So we have no evidence at Ribchester of any battles, any deaths in hostile conditions. Therefore, that forts are changing landscapes into agribusiness. So we know Ribchester's a prime agricultural land. Therefore, the fort is coming to the space, encouraging people to make money and live a Romanized, capitalistic life by forming agribusiness or farming communities surrounding Roman forts, showing that people in the past believed more so in what they could see and feel than what historians would like to tell us about the military, and that they simply beat people up constantly. Now, I'd like to thank you all for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.